Hi, this is my review of Era Balam Pocket Rulebook. This is a pocket role-playing game. It is truly self-contained. In this small book, you have the game system, the campaign setting information. You have a section giving you game master tips and advice. So it's quite complete, quite portable. That is, it is available as a PDF, but it's also available as a physical product. And if you have fond memories of those old school shooters or side scrollers or bullet hell type of games such as R-Type, Gradius, Axele, Raiden, or some newer ones like Ikaruga, you will enjoy this role-playing game. This is not exactly like those games, but there are a lot of elements that truly makes this RPG an excellent game to represent those sorts of adventures. The main difference being that in those games, in those SNES or old arcade shooters, you had like one or two ships fighting against an entire army of enemy ships and motherships and aliens and whatnot. But here you could have 3 or 4 ships working together towards an objective or a goal. So the battles will potentially feel on a larger scale. And of course, because this is a role-playing game, you can do anything that you want. You are not limited to those side-scrolling type of battles or shoot-em-ups or bullet hell type of situations. That is, you do have your skills to carry out checks, to interact with different non-player characters, to step out of your ship. Although most of the action will be on board of your ship, you can go and visit different ports and bases and all sorts of places in planets, etc. Now let's start talking about the quality of the PDF. The PDF is not bookmarked, however this is a short PDF, just 40 pages long, and the table of contents is hyperlinked, so I don't think it would be too much of an obstacle navigating the entire PDF. I like the illustrations, they are perfect for this type of role-playing game. I also like this frame for each of the pages. It feels a lot like an old video game manual, although I think the frame gets a bit blurry in some parts. But overall the graphic design is great. The look of the game fits the theme quite well. Everything is well written, explained and organized, although I did spot a couple of typos. Now let's talk about the contents. First we have an introduction to what this game is all about. The premise is quite simple. This game could be considered a somewhat streamlined role-playing game on the space opera type of affairs. It's more focused on being hard sci-fi. That is, you have a sort of scientific realism. You won't have like crazy space magic and all sorts of over-the-top psychic powers. You have this conflict between aliens and humans using all sorts of technology and skills and training. So it's that type of game. But as I said, I think this is a perfect role-playing game to represent those old-school type of shooters. So what's the basic premise or the plotline? Well, humanity, like in many sci-fi stories, advanced to the point that they were trying to colonize space. And they started to send out space probes into deep space. They sent them in all sorts of directions, but one of them failed when entering the atmosphere of a planet. It basically went in as some sort of unintentional projectile, and it landed in a populated area that belonged to this unknown alien species. So they took it as a sign of war, and they started to hunt down mankind. So the story, the action, takes place in the HX 7371 system. This system has already been colonized by humans. They actually have a very powerful base known as Balam, but the aliens started to attack the different colonies throughout the entire system, and by a miracle Balam was not discovered by the aliens. They even went into the planet where Balam is stationed, and they missed this main base of humanity. So now the citizens of Balam know that these aliens are making a mess of the entire HX 7371 system. It seems that it is very difficult to negotiate with them. There's probably a language barrier of sorts. That's one of the cool things of this setting. They give you just enough information. You could make of this setting anything that you like. If you want the aliens to actually be reasonable, and this was all part of some sort of big misunderstanding, you could have just a few key conflicts and handle most of the things in a diplomatic way. Maybe there are factions within the alien planets that actually have some evil purpose in mind and they don't want peace between humans and aliens, or maybe you want these aliens to be just completely unreasonable or evil or however you like, and they just wanted an excuse to attack humanity and take their technology or resources. It could be handled in any way that you like. Well, regardless, the conflict is about humanity riding these space fighters known as paladins. So they have to fight these aliens that are more than a match against humans. In fact, the situation is quite dire. As I said, they have destroyed most of the colonies and many of the planets have been made a mess of. They are filled with radiation because of the different weapons used. They are wastelands or waste planets perhaps. So you have something that I would consider like a classic trope of those games that I mentioned. So if you wanted like a meme type of situation, like all your base are belong to us, you have no chance to survive and all of that, move zig, you can play that type of situation with this role-playing game. There are many shooters and bullet hell games with those heroes fighting almost seemingly losing battle against this superior alien force. You have that right here. So moving on, we have information on the star system HX7371. Even though you have brief and concise information, you have a lot of adventure seeds based on the information presented for each planet and station and area. You can create all sorts of adventures around these different planets. Now I'm going to give you a bit of the information presented here concerning the planets and stations and other places. So first we have the planet Uncool. This is a planet close to the star HX7371. So the atmosphere here was burned off the planet long ago. It is mostly barren, an irradiated wasteland. And here you do have some locations like the Torres Station and the Vuni, which is located on the opposite side of the planet. This was originally designed as an automated outpost to mine Torre crystals. Then we have planet Candid. This was the first planet surveyed by humans on arrival to HX7371. And it is within the Goldilocks zone. It has liquid water. You have some places within this planet such as the Deng Outpost, known for being one of the most difficult areas to reach on the planet Candid due to rapid temperature changes. We also have Buck City. This is basically a domed city underwater. Then we have information on the planet Balam. This was once a very beautiful colony, but the aliens attacked this planet mercilessly. And luckily, they actually didn't spot that the main base of Balam was located here. So Balam, the base, is located inside an active volcano. This serves as a sort of camouflage to keep on fighting against the aliens, because Balam is sort of like the last stronghold to keep the aliens away from planet Earth. This is where the Paladin fighters are assembled, but you have other locations such as Oko, which is just irradiated ruins after the aliens' first strike. You also have the Ajok Belt, which is situated between Balam and the next planet out from HX7371. This is a stable group of asteroids which are often used as cover by the human forces in the system. Now I really like that they included many irradiated places and ruins, because it reminds me of the first time that I played Fallout 1 for the PC, and you had this section that was completely irradiated. It felt so mysterious, like some sort of post-apocalyptic complex of tombs and crypts, and I think it's going to be a very fun adventure to find some way of either counteracting this sort of radiation or finding some means to protect your characters through suits or some sort of chemical to get inside and retrieve something important perhaps. Then we have information on planet Yuok. This is close to the edge of the Ajok belt and it's covered in jungles despite being on the far side of this belt. Then we have some places within Yuok like Legva, which is situated in a swamp, and at first glance it appears to be so small and insignificant that the aliens have not yet bothered to wipe it out. Then we have Pemba. This was the first colony on Yuok. In the early days of the war, the local government implemented a police state to protect the people. They were quickly overthrown by rebels. Then we have Eshu, the moon of Goab. This is a small moon of the gas giant Goab. Eshu had some small plants beginning to grow at the start of the war. Then we have Nijiko. This is one of the moons of Goab. It's basically a rocky planetoid with large deep craters. But you also have Yamaya, another moon of Goab. This one has huge caverns and artificial caverns even. Now what I like of the different planets and the bases is that you will have to find a way to negotiate your way into the different ports and bases. Some of them are actually in conflict with perhaps Balam or most of humanity. They have separated from humanity. They are still in conflict with the aliens, but they don't want to form part of any sort of plan or organization. So getting your hands on the codes to have a safe docking procedure in any of these bases, or perhaps talking with the different non-player characters to have some amicable or at the very least not hostile relationships in trade and perhaps in war-related situations, that could serve as an important part of the plotline of any adventure or an entire campaign. Then we have Hare Asteroid Belt. This is one of the most dangerous regions in the solar system. It is extremely unstable and comprised of vast amounts of fast-moving asteroids. Then we have Fa, the asteroid in the Hare Asteroid Belt. This asteroid is actually the secret base of an inventor known as Adam Idowu. So this is sort of like his safe house or place to find refuge or solitude. Then we have Vale. This is basically a well-camouflaged biodome standing above a frozen lake. Then we have information on Zui, the moon of Ibus. This is an unremarkable moon, but there's a group of people here that are hostile to both humans and aliens. You also have planet Sopona. This is a rocky planet. It is the largest planetary alien stronghold in the star system, and it is unknown how strong the aliens are on this planet, the strength of their presence. Then we have Rujira. This is the moon of Obatala. This is a tiny moon of the only gas giant on the same side of the system as Sopona. This is viewed primarily as a refuge for the mad and desperate. Then we have Kamata, moon of Obatala. This is covered in many alien facilities that they use as shipyards to produce their ever-increasing fleet of fighters. Then we have the alien mothership. This is a vessel many times the size of the fighters it carries. It is a mobile base for the alien attack force. Then we have Modimo. This is located at the Lagrange point between Obatala and Kamata, and this place is used as a platform to launch alien attacks. Then we have Zango. This is the furthest flung outpost of humans. It is situated in the Oort cloud of HX 7371, undetectable without knowing the location. After that, I left a lot of the details concerning the planets and the outposts and bases out. And like I said at the beginning of this section, it's not too much information, it's not that extensive, but it's enough for you to come up with some adventure seeds just focusing on a single planet or base. The next section features character creation. Here you have a few steps to follow, they are quite simple. Step 1, it's all about your pilot. You figure out your backstory. Maybe your pilot wants to fight to defend his or her family. Or maybe you are a fantastic pilot and you were born to fight. Or maybe you were forced into service and you are reluctant. You also have information on quirks. Maybe your character has bloodlust, so you'll do whatever it takes to kill aliens. You become a bit obsessed with fighting and it's somewhat difficult to leave combat. Or maybe you are terrified. Everyone around you is crazy and who would ever volunteer to step into this war? So you have to make willpower checks when you are outnumbered. And you have a few more quirks. They're quite simple, just to flesh out your character a bit. Then we have step 2, which is all about your craft. Your craft has a number of slots. These slots can be fitted with different modules, weapons and such to customize your craft for a specific task. This again reminds me a lot of all those video games where you have your ship selection stage or module selection, and you can have a pretty straightforward fighter, or you could also specialize perhaps on being more defensive, more agile, all about defense if you want, or focus completely on offense. So these modules will allow for that. You can only choose one module. Maybe you can choose the fighter module, so that you are equipped with a number of short-range weapons. This is all about dogfights. You also have the siege module, so this gives you a long-distance laser cannon that is quite powerful. You are not as maneuverable as the fighter, but you can easily take out larger and better armored targets from afar. This is sort of like the sniper type of paladin, because remember, paladins are the names of these ships. Then we have the salvage module. This allows you to deploy salvage drones to recover all sorts of materials and resources. Then you have the support module. This is about laying mines and mine sweeping. You also have the scout module. This is your stealth or invisibility type of ship. This is all about reconnaissance missions or trying to lay out ambushes. So as you can see, each player could choose a different type of module so that you are always prepared for different missions. Or maybe there are some very specific tasks at hand that you need just a group of similar ships. Maybe there are going to be a lot of skirmishes and you would prefer to have 2 or 3 fighters in your group of ships. Or maybe it's all about rescuing, obtaining different materials. You could have the salvage module and just perhaps a fighter and a scout to escort this salvage ship to recover those materials. So it all depends on the mission. Or maybe you're setting up a trap, so you're obviously going to take a support module and perhaps also take a siege equipped ship just in case some larger ships appear or you want to target a specific base. It will also be worth it to take a siege module. So it's all about the mission. You can swap these modules. Once you choose a module for your ship, it doesn't mean that you have to stay with that module. You can change them in different ports, for example. You also have forward mounted guns. You have 2 slots. That is, you could choose 2 guns or weapons to fight up front. You can also equip your ship with different armor, engines, maneuver engines, cargo, how much you're going to be transporting, or maybe you want like a tail gun of sorts, some sort of way to protect yourself if you are getting followed or attacked from behind, but that would take cargo space. You actually have 10 slots of cargo. Strategy and planning ahead plays a major role in your missions and battles. Then we have step 3. This is about choosing your attributes. The attributes of your pilot are the attributes of your ship. They are one and the same. So first you have, for example, potence, which is about strength and intelligence, and charisma, how you affect the world around you. Strength is all about towing objects and perhaps resisting some sort of stressful situations. You also have intelligence, which is all about mental power, using different skills. You also have charisma, which is about social situations and diplomacy and such. Then we have the defense category with stamina, which is your physical toughness of both your pilot and your ship, and how much damage you can take, how much you can withstand. Then we have willpower. This is all about mental determination. This is when you have to take some risks and do some activities that would be quite terrifying for some. Because of your willpower, you will be able to do them effectively. Then we have the reaction category with dexterity, which is about maneuverability and precision. You also have wits, which is the reaction time, to see how easy you can respond to different situations. You also have luck. This is your pilot's luck overall. It's particularly useful when you are carrying out unskilled roles. Now, as I said, these attributes are the same for your pilot and your ship. So when your ship is shooting at your enemies, that same attribute is going to influence when your pilot is perhaps shooting outside of your ship, using perhaps a gun or some sort of weapon in a space station or something similar. Although I do have some words about how combat outside of ships is handled differently in this role-playing game when compared to other RPGs in the ERA system. Then we have step 4. You choose your skills. You have all sorts of skills, for example, personal skills like gunnery, investigation. Another curious thing is that gunnery is used for all sorts of weapon attacks, be it handheld weapons or mounted guns on your fighter. So even if you are using, for example, a sword, it would apply to gunnery. So I guess you could say it's a weaponry type of skill. You also have stealth and survival, 0G when you are using your 0G suit. Perhaps you need to make some emergency repairs in combat to your ship in space and you don't have the time to dock or go to a particular spaceport. Then you have technical skills such as computers, engineering, navigation, science. You also have interaction skills such as instruction, intimidation, persuasion. Then we have step 5, which is calculate your derived stats. So by taking those attributes, you can determine your encumbrance, the size, the notoriety of your pilot based on your deeds or misdeeds. your speed, your initiative modifier, defense, damage modifier, crit modifier, and structure points. And we will talk about those later on. They're somewhat self-explanatory. For example, structure points is the amount of damage that a paladin can take before it is destroyed. But I will give more details about that later on. After that, we have step 6, which is all about the available equipment. And here I think it would also have been really handy if they separated the different gear and equipment by things that your pilot can use and things that your ship can use. It's not that difficult to tell really, because if you see mounted guns, well, it's obviously for your fighter ship or your paladin rather. But if you see something that applies to a normal human like a 0G suit, then it's for your pilot. But I think it would still be a bit more handy to have like separation by categories. So you have basic equipment such as access codes to access different bases and ports. You also have an additional engine for your ship, advanced targeting systems, automated scanners, long-range mounted guns. And remember, you have a lot of freedom when it comes to the customization of your ship. For example, a ship specializing in salvaging, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a pushover. You can equip your ship with some things that could make it a bit more efficient in combat. So you have other things such as dual engine configuration mount, emergency medical unit, the tail gun mount that I was telling you to attack enemies from behind, another trope from those classic shooters or side-scroller type of shooters. You also have different types of armor and laser guns, repair nanites, the 0G suit of course, all sorts of things. Now we have the part 3 of this book. This is all about the rule set for Era Balam. The system is the same as all of the other Era systems. If you have already played Era the Consortium or Era the Empowered, the core system is basically the same. So you have a pool of 10-sided dice. These are generated by adding your attribute and your skill. So if you have, let's say, dexterity of 3 and some applicable skill of 2, you're going to be rolling 5 dice in total. That's your pool. And this system uses exploding dice. If you roll a 10 on any of your 10-sided die, you keep on rolling that die. So if you roll a 10 and you roll again and you roll another 10, you keep rolling and adding successes. You do not need to roll for all of the actions. There are some trivial actions that happen automatically, but you do have information on thresholds and successes. So for example, for very easy things, perhaps hitting some unaware target, you only need to roll 4 or above. But for something really hard, like for example, moving among fast moving asteroids, you will need to roll an 8 or 9 or above. So it all depends on the type of task. So let's say that you have your pool of 5 dice and the difficulty of the task is 5. You need to roll, for each die that you roll 5 or above, you generate 1 success. Then we have information on failures and fumbling. Every roll of 1 on any die, it's considered a failure. So if you generate more failures than successes, you will get a fumble. And depending on the number of failures, things could be quite bad. If you only roll 1 more failure than successes, maybe your gun jams for a bit and you just need to repair it. But maybe you generate 3 or more failures than successes. Maybe you lose an entire part of your ship, it explodes, and now that module or system is ruined. And of course, you also have information on how to generate different successes, or rather the level of success. That is, maybe you generate a couple of successes and you succeed in a simple action. But what if you generated 5, 6, or even 7 successes? Not only you accomplish the task at hand, but you achieve an additional thing or more benefits. Maybe you were searching for something, some sort of resource or weapons cache, and you find that, or even more. Or maybe you are trying to negotiate with a non-player character, and not only does that player character offers his or her support, maybe now you have a long-term working relationship that will benefit you for the rest of the adventure or the entire campaign. You also have information on active and passive roles. For example, if you're not actively searching for something, the task is going to be more difficult. The threshold is going to be higher. You also have information on opposed roles. This is basically generating more successes than your opponent. You also have information on skilled roles. If you do not have the skill required, you can still make a luck roll that is attribute plus luck, but the success threshold is always going to be 10. You need to roll 10 on each die to generate more successes. And you also have situations concerning luck dice when, for example, when the combination of your attribute, bonus, and skill and penalties, because there are penalties depending on what you are trying to do, maybe you can only roll 0 or fewer dice, so that's impossible. You are permitted to roll a single luck die. And if you roll a 10, you actually achieve success. But things could go wrong. It's easier to fumble. If you roll a 1, you commit a severe fumble. If you're lucky, you will only roll 2 or 3, and that's just moderate and minor fumbles. You also have information on luck points. Basically, for each point that the character has in their luck attribute, you have luck points that you can spend perhaps on getting more successes or removing a failure from a roll. However, each time you spend these luck points, the Game Master will get bad luck points that he can use to bolster or improve the rolls of different non-player characters against your characters. It's also important to note that the defender always wins. That is, if you are carrying out an action against another non-player character, when there is a tie, the defender wins that roll. Then we have information on salvaging and landing, how to carry out spacewalks using your 0G suit. It's all based on checks, and some things, as I said, could be automatic. It depends on how easy the task is. You also have information on trading. There is no currency in Era Balam. It's all about trading goods. You also have information on taking damage. You basically have damage and crit thresholds. If you roll above a damage threshold, you only deal a small amount of damage, perhaps 1 damage on a system. But if you roll above the crit threshold, or rather the crit threshold or above, you can even deal 4 damage on a system. Locations are determined randomly unless you have the right system or module for that. So you make a roll and maybe you damage the maneuver engines of your opponent, or the hull integrity, or some main module or main engine. So you have all of the details on hull breaches, destroying ships, system damage, and how to repair ships. Some repairs could be done in space. You just need to get out using your 0G suit, of course, and making the repairs during combat. But it's better if you have some friends protecting you from the enemies. But it's a lot safer if you manage to find a port nearby. You also have information on how to handle darkness, electromagnetic pulses that could disrupt the systems of the paladins and the alien ships. You also have information on when you are encumbered, when there are some hazards such as fire and horror. Maybe you are paralyzed by horror and fear. There's information when the system has the overload status. You also have information on stealth, getting stunned, suffocation, when you are being surprised, ambushes, what happens when your pilot is unconscious, when your ship is undetectable. Now let's talk a bit more about combat. When you enter combat, you determine initiative by making a roll. The highest roll has the highest initiative or highest priority, and then the turns flow like so. And this flows equally during all of the combat turns. That is, you never have to roll again for initiative, but you can choose to act later, perhaps wait for your enemies to react or act, and then you decide for the course of action. And combat in Balam is quite abstract. It's not very simulationist. There are some tactics and strategies that you can use, but it's mostly focused on the story. The attacks and movement, it's all about storytelling and thinking of the situation, using different things for cover, attacking different enemies. You don't have a list of many different attacks that you can use. It's all about the modules that equip your ship, the weapons that you are going to use. That is, choosing to use a particular weapon against an enemy and perhaps attacking an enemy from behind. But basically, you can act once each turn. Perhaps you want to move or just attack, or use a skill or move an attack. Because, for example, movement in combat, you can move a number of distance units less than your speed and still carry out some sort of full action with no penalty, like an attack or use some sort of technical skill. But maybe you want to move further, perhaps 1.5 times more than your usual speed. You can attack or do some other action while doing this, but at a minus 50% dice penalty. Or you could choose to move double the number of distance units and don't do anything at all. No attacks and no special tests or skills. Another important thing to note is that you cannot attack and then move. You have to always move and then attack or operate some system or do any other sorts of actions. So it's better to keep that in mind. If you want to first move behind cover and then attack from there, it's going to be somewhat tactical in that regard. Then we have information on defense. Defense is basically a penalty that is given to your dice pool. So maybe the enemy ship has a defense of 2, and maybe you are rolling 6 dice to attack that enemy. Because of the 2 defense, you will only be able to roll 4 dice. The 2 acts as a -2 against your attack roll. So as I said in my previous example, maybe you rolled 4 dice. Maybe the number that you need for each hit is 7. 7 is the standard number. So in those 4 dice, each die that rolls 7 or above represents a hit. So maybe you got lucky and you scored 3 hits. Maybe your weapons were twin linked and that makes it double the number of hits. So maybe instead of just hitting and connecting 3 hits, you connect 6 hits. Now damage is determined by your weapon completely. You roll those same number of hits, let's say 3, and maybe your weapon has a damage threshold of 2 and a crit threshold of 4. So for each 2 or above, you would deal 1 damage. But if you rolled even higher, like I said, maybe a 4 or perhaps 6, you would be dealing 4 damage for each of those hits. But that's when armor comes into play. Some sort of very resistant plating could impose a penalty on these thresholds. So maybe if your gun had a damage threshold of 2, and because of the armor, now the threshold is 5 or above, and maybe your crit threshold was 4, and now because of the armor, you need to roll 7 or 8 or above or something like that. So armor plays a very important role when determining how much damage your ship or the enemy ship is going to take. Now you may have noticed that there is no information on how to carry out combat on foot or outside of your ship, and this is because this RPG focuses completely on space combat. You could use the system presented in Era the Consortium, and if you do not know about that role-playing game, I recommend that you check out the link in the description below. It will take you to my review of the Core Rulebook. You could use that system to have some battles outside of your ship, but if not, you're going to have to streamline things quite a bit. Here they say that pilots do not carry sidearms, and I actually do not like this rule. I think all pilots should have some sort of weapon with them in case their ship gets destroyed and they manage to escape, or maybe they decide to go down and explore a planet and they get attacked by alien forces on foot. I think you should always be armed, so I would remove this rule. So combat on foot would be handled in a very streamlined way, perhaps because here you do not have lists of different machine guns and laser pistols and rifles and monoblade swords and all of those sci-fi things. You have to resolve combat outside of your ship in a very simple, streamlined storytelling type of way. That is, it would be more determined by your narrative skills, your imagination, and making sense of things, rather than simulating the intricacies of combat on foot. By the end of the book, we have general advice for the game master. This covers things such as ammunition and fuel. They are quite unlimited unless you are shooting for many turns, perhaps 20 turns, then ammunition would be out for a particular weapon system. Or maybe you have been flying for a long time without resting at a port. You could find yourself adrift in space with no fuel. You also have information on how to handle the destruction of systems, traveling between planets, how long does it take, how to be flexible as a game master, how to encourage creativity and using attributes and skills. You also have information on leveling up, because in this system you do not gather experience points like a typical role-playing game. It's all based on objectives and goals. So when you achieve a goal, each character gains an attribute point and a number of skill points to level up. And by the end of the book you have your character sheet, and that's it. So overall, what do I think of Era Balam Pocket Edition? I think this is a very cool, portable and short role-playing game. If you're going to use this as a PDF, of course, you're not going to be concerned with portability, but because it's just 40 pages long, it is a great option for short sci-fi campaigns. Of course, you could have long campaigns if you want, although I think this system, or rather this role-playing game, shines when having some short campaigns with intense firefights and missions where the player characters are fighting against alien ships. However, this points out something that I would consider a bit of a negative. You have no stats for alien ships. All of the ships have to be created by you. So I recommend that you take some time to prepare for the session, to make a few generic enemies when it comes to the alien ships and some enemy aces that are a bit more difficult. I also think that this game would have benefited from some examples on how to carry out an adventure or a campaign. This system can handle more standard space opera type of affairs, but I keep thinking that this is perfect for those Axelay, Raiden, R-type type of situations. And if you want to recreate those video game type of experiences that I mentioned of R-type, etc., where you have these few ships fighting against dozens of enemies at the same time, dozens of enemy ships or weird alien flying creatures or whatever, I recommend that you either create a bunch of weak enemies, that is, as a game master, you create many enemies that are completely destroyed with just one hit, or that you handle it in a more abstract way with a single enemy representing perhaps a dozen ships. So that way you can get that feel that you're actually fighting against the hordes of enemy fighters with your paladins. And this doesn't mean that things cannot get complex or deep in a campaign. For example, I'm going to mention a situation. I'm not going to say the title of the video game to avoid spoilers for people who perhaps want to play that game, but there is a game that is very cool. It's handled like a side-scroller type of role-playing game. That is, it's just like a space shooter, but instead of the screen scrolling constantly as your ship moves forward and fights all of those ships, it's basically a turn-based strategy type of situation. So you choose where you want a particular ship to be at. You're basically controlling an army of ships and you start fighting these enemy alien forces. But when you actually finish that game, the alien force actually like engulfs you and transforms you into aliens. So now you're trying to make your way back to the planet, to your base, thinking that you are still human and you are getting attacked by other humans and you still don't understand why your own army is attacking you, but that's because you no longer form part of the human species. You are now a sort of alien hybrid, a very weird alien organism, and as you are moving towards humanity's base, you have actually now become an invader. So that gets you thinking, what if the aliens that you were fighting before, that is in the first half of the game, were actually humans at first, and they went to this alien threat to try to neutralize it or destroy it, but they were engulfed as well and they became aliens. So maybe the cycle repeats itself. Maybe humans are constantly being sent against this alien enemy and they get transformed and now they become the new enemies. So that's somewhat deep for a side-scroller type of situation. I would have liked it if they included a simple system to have combats outside of the ships. Like I said, it's easy enough to handle with the skills and attributes in a very streamlined way, but that limits a lot of the situations and encounters to being on board of your ship. Sure, you can go down and go into the different cities and spaceports and make all sorts of social and technical related checks, but when there's battle or violence, maybe some players could feel a bit let down that they have to handle things in a super simplified way. But then again, maybe some players will appreciate this simplicity. Maybe they want to get back into their ships and have all sorts of space battles as soon as possible, and they just want to go through the on foot type of situations as quickly as they possibly can. And because you do not have sample enemy ships and some examples as to how to handle adventures and campaigns with this RPG, I would recommend this RPG to semi-experienced role players. If you are first starting with role-playing games, I would recommend that you try some other RPG before this one. Perhaps a couple of sessions would be enough. Because of the lack of examples and the lack of enemy ships, you could get into some rough spots. But for the rest of you that have played RPGs just once or twice, I highly recommend that you get Era Balam Pocket Edition, especially if you are a fan of those retro or old school type of video game shooters. This is perfect to represent those situations, as I said, Axelay, Raiden, Ikaruga, R-Type, all of those fun shooters. This is the perfect role-playing game for that, especially if you want to put an emphasis on storytelling rather than a more simulationist approach. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.